Hello. Hi, everyone. Welcome to MongoDB TV. I'm your host for today, tonight, this morning, Pavel Dukovny. And we have Steve Edwards with us. And today's topic is Laravel at scale. Steve works for a company named GovTribe, and we're going to hear in a second about what GovTribe is doing in general, what it's doing with Laravel, uh, and just fun it is to code in PHP. Um, so I'm Pavel. I'm a lead developer advocate at MongoDB, and I've been a data developer for my almost entire career. Once it was called like a DBA, but I transitioned into a data engineer and then a full stack engineer. But my main languages were usually Node.js, Python, a little bit of Vue, React. Um, but recently I'm on the PHP pod, so I'm writing some PHP content, and I'm working with PHP, and I'm working with Laravel and Symfony and all the cool frameworks. And suddenly I realized that you know PHP is cool in a way. It's kind of like an old school with this really nice new tooling that it got. So it'll be really a fun talk to Steve and see some of the things that they're doing. So without further ado, uh, hey Steve, how are you?
Good, good. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, and introduce GovTribe to us?
Okay, so I've been in the IT world since about 1995. I started out doing, I started out in the banking industry right out of college, and for 10 years, I worked for a banking software company that's gone through many name changes, and I'm not sure where what their name is anymore. Um, but I started out doing just basic tech support for what were called interfaces, which back in the day were ways to communicate between PC-based banking applications and large mainframe systems such as IBM AS400s and 3270s, Unix machines, and we were using DOS emulation through their APIs to literally write data to screens and send enters and stuff like that. Really, before APIs got to be a thing, at least in that world. So, um, anyway, I started messing around with web programming back probably late 90s, 98. Initially used Front Page, Microsoft Front Page. If anybody's seen those original graphics, I was using them. And got into it through I was a diehard racquetball player for a long time. So I managed all the data and results for our state racquetball association here in Oregon. Started playing with PHP, MySQL, probably around 2002, somewhere around there. But the company I was at had a position open, supposedly for somebody to know those things, and the position never got filled. But that got me into learning about it, and I really loved it, and wrote a lot of Scratch, PHP, MySQL. The whole LAMP stack, Linux, Apache,
Yeah.
MySQL, PHP, which was about the only way to do web applications at that time. Um, Then I got about 2006. I got into the Drupal world. Like many people, I got tired of writing my own thing and went looking for a CMS. At the time, I was working for Freightliner, which is now Daimler, and found Drupal. And it was interesting. A blog that I like to read was using it, and they happened to have this ad that says, "Hey, we need somebody that knows Drupal to help us." I was like, "Oh, what's Drupal?" Started playing with it, loved it, got into it, and then eventually, about 2009, I got into Drupal full time and did that up through about 2019. Excuse me, 2018. Living in the Drupal world, so mostly backend stuff, mostly PHP. Early Drupal up through version 7
All right.
was its own thing. It was a Drupal API, and there's a great image if you look for it out there about the Drupal learning curve, where it's like straight up and then here, and then you fall off a cliff. And it was great. Then starting with Drupal 8, They decided to go, I guess you call it mainstream, where instead of doing everything invented here, we use Symfony, we use Guzzle, we use Twig, a lot of the standard off-the-shelf components that were simply, put together with the Drupal wrapper around it, for lack of a better term. But then about 2016, I started seeing AngularJS, so Angular 1, for anybody that knows how Angular versions go. And I was like, oh, this is cool. So I started playing with that, got to do some contract work with Angular and a platform called Form.io. And then about the time that Angular 2 came along, I was like, I ain't going to do this. Let's find something else. And then I came across Vue, and Vue was just, for me, it was so much easier to use. So I was doing Drupal 7 at a very huge corporation called Fluke. It was all PHP, and I really wanted to get into Vue, so I left there, went to a job doing Vue full time, got laid off there right around the beginning of COVID because of other reasons, not necessarily COVID. And then November of 2020 came to GovTribe. And we'll get into this a little bit. The GovTribe stack was Laravel with Vue, Mongo on the back end, Elasticsearch on the front. And
so that's
I knew PHP, but I didn't know Laravel, so it was a real learning curve, getting into Laravel. Now, interestingly enough, in regards to Mongo, the Drupal stack has always used MySQL as the standard lamp stack stuff. But there was a push by one significant Drupal community member. I can't remember when, to start using Mongo, to allow, to create a Mongo driver for Drupal so that people could use Mongo instead of MySQL. And I don't know how far that got and if anybody ever started using it, but I remember that push. And that was probably the first time that I became aware of Mongo and the document database and how it differs. And then even at that time, I even went and took through Mongo University. I wasn't a Node developer, but I still wanted to learn it. So I took the online course of Mongo for Node developers. And I probably learned more out of that. I was focused more on just interacting with Mongo database, querying it, doing that kind of stuff more so than writing Node.js itself. And so yeah, I've been here for the last 3.5 years, focused on that particular stack that we use here.
And it's the first time that you've worked on like PHP and Mongo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that combination. I had done a lot of one of the interesting things we did at Fluke was using Apache Solr as our data backend, and then so that's a key value source. So it's similar, but not quite the same. But it's definitely different than MySQL, just in terms of how you interact with it and how the JSON structure that the data is stored in.
Yeah. All right. So obviously the agenda that we want to know and we want to provide through this stream is, what does GovTribe do and how does it use MongoDB, Atlas, and Laravel to deploy backend at scale and be able to handle a massive amount of throughput and inserts, right?
Right. So I guess little intro on what GovTribe is and GovExec overall. So GovTribe was started by two guys. The names are Jay Hariani and Nate Nash. They're the founders. And they were Deloitte and Touche consultants for a long time. So they traveled around the world, Middle East, Europe, doing big time implementations and stuff. So basically, D&T is a big, huge government contractor. They provide a lot of contracting services for the federal government. And so they eventually got tired of the corporate runaround and, a number of things and said, okay, let's do our own thing. And what they decided to do was create tools for contractors that they wished they had when they were federal contractors that helped them find jobs. And so at the time, if you were a federal contractor and you wanted help, what you would do is you would hire some sort of agency that was very labor intensive, in that you would have an account manager who was responsible for finding contracts for you, going out and finding contracts for you, and saying, hey, I found this one, are you interested in this? I found this one, are you interested in this? And you would pay them, whether hourly basis or however that works, doesn't matter. Because the sources of federal contract data are very disparate and disorganized. They come from many different locations. There's a couple primary ones like sam.gov, for instance, and they have APIs. But the structure you're going to get is going to be different. The amount of data you're getting is going to be different. And you've got to look here, and you got to look here, and you got to look here, and you got to look there. And so their goal was to use technology to compete with these other types of agencies. And so with two people over a number of years, they started around 2012. So, and interestingly enough, the first thing they tried to use to create GovTribe was Drupal at the time. And I think they disabused themselves of that idea fairly quickly, especially back then in Drupal 7 days. Doing what we do with GovTribe now with Drupal would have been not pretty, really not pretty at all. And so, therefore, the basic gist is twofold. One, we have a backend and a utility, a repo that we call Task Runner that goes out and hits all these APIs, gets all this data, and some amounts of it is just crazy huge. Some federal contract awards and grant opportunities and so on, just the amounts of transactions, the amount of data coming in. And you're going to go all these different places and hit it and ingest it into Mongo in the background, jobs that run at night, and have it in somewhat a clean and organized structure. And then the second portion of this is to create a visual CRM for our clients to use that allows them to sort and filter and track and these different opportunities and grants and awards, and allow them to focus and follow that. So it's an account-based model where you pay a monthly fee depending on number of features and so on. Something fairly standard as a SaaS product or PaaS, however you want to frame it. Platform as a service or software as a service. And so the main two features that we have, or at least from the beginning, were called pursuits and pipelines. So a pursuit is sort of our wrapper around one of these federal awards or grants or opportunities or so on. And you can add data to it and comments and assign it to people and your account and so on. And then a pipeline is just like any standard pipeline where you have different stages that you can create. Okay, this pursuit is in triage, now it's here, now it's in this stage, now it's here. Okay, we didn't win it, so it goes away. So that's the basic gist of what we've done. And up until probably a year ago, we've been focused solely on federal information, because that's where the bulk of that type of information is and contracting is. However, we had another product that focused on state and local, so counties, municipalities, states and stuff like that. That was a separate product, but we had a number of customers telling us, hey, we really like to have state and local too. So over the past half year, we've been actively focusing on bringing state and local data into our application. And unfortunately, in most of those cases, it's screen scraping as compared to having legit APIs. So it's a little more painful, and difficult, but we're almost there to having just about all the states in.
Right.
Now, from a code structure standpoint, for the geeks out there, like me, we have three basic repositories. So we have Task Runner, we have Framework, and we have Web. So Task Runner is the portion the background portion that hits the APIs and ingests all the data, running the different jobs. Framework is the underlying repo for both Task Runner and Web, and that it contains all Laravel models and all the glue structure that's used in common. So, when you're ingesting the Task Runner, you've got an FCO, Federal Contract Opportunity Model. So it creates those models and sticks those in Mongo in the appropriate collection. Web is all our front end stuff. So we've got all the controllers, we've got all the JavaScript code, the view, your icons, all that kind of stuff. So it's sort of upside down pyramid, if you want to think about it that way, with Framework on the bottom, Task Runner on one side, and Web on the other side.
Right.
And so I came on, to get back to the company, I came on in November of 2020, and it was just those two, and they were getting to the point where they didn't have time to do everything. They couldn't do demos for customers and deal with administration and all that kind of stuff. So they brought me on as employee number 3, and then we brought on a customer, what we call customer success, customer service person, to start handling all of the customer interactions. And that team has grown out to a few people, and we've added another 4 or 5 developers since then. Some working on back end, some working combination of back and front end, so on.
Nice. So that's not a huge team, but being able to do a lot.
Right. Well, and then in September of 21, we were bought or sold ourselves. We became part of a larger organization called GovExec. GovExec, as is pretty much the prime news source in the government contracting community, and it's been around since something as a periodical, late 60s or 70s. It's been around quite a long time, and it had been part of the Atlantic Media Group, and then they split off, I want to say March of 21, it was spun off from the Atlantic to be its own thing that's focused on the government contracting space. And so GovExec is largely a media company. We have a number of different periodicals, publications. Defense One is the one that comes to mind. There's some other ones. And then we are pretty much the software arm of them. And they've given us some tools and things that we can integrate into our platform, into just click data and any number of things. So that's sort of our overall structure now.
All right, nice. So before we dive in deeper and start talking about the technical part, looking at the database and the sharding that you're using, explaining what sharding is in a few words, and then we can go over the way you work with Laravel. There's a question from the audience, and somebody asked, why do people say MongoDB is not good for relational data? I really love to use it, but sadly people say bad about it. So first of all, I think that it depends what are you referring to as relational data. I think MongoDB can be as good as SQL databases for relational data. It depends of specifically the workloads that you are going to use. And again, in MongoDB, we do model relations between the data. It's just that you can benefit from some of MongoDB's document model abilities to embed documents as the relation within a document, or you can actually use a reference approach similar to SQL databases where you have, like, I don't know if it's a primary key and a foreign key, but like an ID that references another document which has the pointer to that ID. And today, Steve also gonna talk a little bit about the way they modeled many relationships. So that will be interesting as well. So I would say, if you haven't tried MongoDB, try it and see if it works for your use case. We're a general purpose database, so we should cover most of the use cases. A lot of the time when I speak to customers, I say, if they come and say, why do you use MongoDB? I would say, why not? Like, if you find why not, then I can, agree or disagree, or we can debate a bit about it. But I believe MongoDB can be as good for relational data as relational databases. Again, not doing a lot of joins the same way that relational databases are supposed to be built and not model the data specifically as relational databases do, but this data can live successfully in MongoDB.
So, yeah, I will. Coming from the MySQL world that I was in for so long, I get the question, because in SQL I can very easily go in and say, okay, give me this and this from this table, inner join on this, left join or right join, and it's really easy to get a combined data set. Not so easy in Mongo to do, but we do quite a lot of relational data in our data structure, where we will have a lot of model IDs. If we have, for instance, we'll have a standard account model, and in an account model, you'll have the owner model ID, and you'll have the human model ID, and in the human you'll have the account model ID. That's the parent of it, and then we can reference that. So when you go to index it into something like Elastic, then you can combine that all into one record, and everything's nice and neat. It is a little harder from a query standpoint, and I suppose unless you get really good at the Mongo queries, where I'm not yet, but there is still quite a lot of data relationship between the various models, the collections that we have that are defined by the Laravel models. It's different than it's similar to, but different than, like I said, a Lucene index, Apache Solr, Elastic Index, where all of your records are designed to be standalone. You can do references, but it's a little more difficult. Where here in Mongo, yeah, you want to put as much in your document as you can, but you can't embed everything, or it would just be a monster. You'd have duplicated data everywhere. So there are ways to do relations between collections.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting that you also mentioned that you've moved to, from the government perspective to the new local and how do you say
State and local.
yeah, state and local. So I guess that the polymorphic side of MongoDB, the fact that you can host different structures within collections, help you probably with ingesting new data types into MongoDB as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the reasons when I talked to Nate about this, since all these decisions were made before my time here, part of the issue, one of the reasons for wanting to choose Mongo, is that you have such disparate data structures, and that you can import them and not have to worry about having everything predefined in a schema, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can, your field can handle JSON. You could have an array within an object. You could have an object within an array. You can, you can have strings or other scalar values. You can have all kinds of different variations without having to worry about everything exactly predefined ahead of time.
Yeah, and I guess that the fact that you're using Laravel helps you because the framework gives you sometimes tools to make something more like make this jungle that it sounds a little bit like a jungle to people, for something more structured, right? You have like the module objects, and you can know that your application understands the database because it knows the different types of documents that might surface.
Right. I guess one thing to touch on, sorry if I'm jumping the gun here, but the main driver for integrating between Laravel and Mongo for years was the Jen Seeger's library. Jen Seeger, was it Laravel MongoDB? I forget the name of the particular library, and that was the sort of go-to ORM for communicating between the two, for handling, where it would basically handle Laravel, combine Laravel with the Mongo, utilities to allow on the Laravel end, you can just say, okay, save this, and it handles everything for you. That, with what an ORM does. Was it with Laravel 10? I think it was. That was officially handed off to the Mongo organization, which was very great for us. I know my bosses were very happy about that, just because now there's greater availability of resources to put into updating that and keeping that updated, whereas one person before didn't really have the bandwidth to keep up as needed. I don't know if it's probably a typical open source thing. Was, hey, this is cool, I'm using this, I'll let everybody try it. Pretty soon is overwhelmed by the demand and everything that needs to happen as things grow.
Yeah, it got a great lift up. It has like a full documentation with examples and usage examples, and it is now part of our official documentation. So I encourage a lot of people to visit our Laravel documentation and see the different examples, see how it integrates with Mongo. And I know you had a migration from the community driver to the new Laravel integration. So I wonder how smooth it went. You were using Atlas with the community one as well, right?
Yeah, we had already been on Atlas when we were here. So from an Atlas standpoint, there really wasn't any change that we had to worry about. I did that as part of a larger upgrade from Laravel 9 to Laravel 10. And so there was a lot of other things going on there in terms of, dependencies that you got to update and things you got to change because libraries are no longer maintained for this version of Laravel, etc. So speaking strictly about the Jen Seegers library and this library, it was really not that bad. There were some minor method signature changes where you had to pass an additional parameter in here and there, or maybe some function name changes. But for the most part, it was pretty pro forma, not incredibly difficult. A lot of namespace changes, in all your different PHP classes, obviously, but that's one of the few cases where bulk find and replace comes in very handy.
Yeah. So, um, so maybe we can have a quick look at your Atlas deployment and talk a little bit about how the Atlas deployment looks like, and then maybe talk a little bit about some sample documents and some sample code that you can share with us. Um, but before we jump into that, and I'll let you get ready for this one. I wanted to mention that we also have our MongoDB Learning Bites. It's at learn.mongodb.com, and we have the Learning Bites section, and we have uh, content that is currently. Oh, I'm not sharing this. Let me reshare my screen. Um, yeah, so hopefully everybody can see that now. All right, yeah, so we have the learning bites and we have the getting started with Laravel, which is a basic one, and we have a new Laravel transactions one, which I'm leading, and we're gonna have some more learning bites going in. So it's really nice. It's a 20-minute um, overview with real code examples and tools that you can start quickly, basically. I'll stop sharing and I'll let Steve increase the page a little bit. And this is your production cluster.
Yes.
So MongoDB 7.0, which is one of the latest versions.
Yeah, we were up, believe it or not, up until I'll say 2 months ago, 3 months ago, we were on Laravel. We were on 4. We were on version 4 still, and that was getting end of life, and we were getting all the warnings. So we said, okay, let's jump up to 7.
Was it difficult with Atlas?
I'm sorry, what?
Was it difficult with Atlas to jump on from 4 to 7?
Well, you had to do it in a stepwise thing. It wasn't just a straight jump. So what I did was, the Atlas people actually, I contacted them and said, hey, we're going to do this. This is what we need to do. What do I need to do? And they said, okay, we'll monitor this. There's a couple settings we had to change. It had to do with backwards compatibility. And I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't remember what they were. We were pinning a version, I think, or something like that for backwards compatibility. But over the space of probably about 5, 6, 7, over about 3 weeks, I would upgrade from 4 to 5. Okay, let's stop, make sure everything's working fine. Interestingly enough, all of us on our local setups with our local Mongo running, usually Max with homebrew type of setup, we were already on 7 anyway. And we were working fine, so we weren't really concerned about it being an issue. But I just worked with them, said, okay, here's what we're going to do it. We'll do it at this time. And then they just kept their eyes on it for a while. We'd make sure everything was good, and then we jumped to the next version. So yeah, we we got a little bit behind on Mongo versions there, but now we're somewhat current.
We're aligned. All right, nice. And what is the size of this cluster? Like how big is it?
Let's see.
Yeah, I think I saw something like 500 gigabytes per shard.
Yeah, very well could be. I know we get tons
Yeah,
of data.
if you go back on the left side,
Uh-huh.
you have like the storage. the storage, the
Yeah, I think
storage.
it should be made known that I'm not a Mongo expert. I've just sort of got thrust into this DevOps stuff, so I'm winging some of this.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
I think the green line shows the sizes. So it says around 258 gigabyte of disk space
oh, here
used
we
by.
are over here.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So I guess
260, 270, 258. So right around 260.
yeah, but it's the disk size and it's compressed. So I guess that the data sizes should be like around maybe 2-3 times this size.
Yeah,
Um,
it's
right.
we have a lot of it. One of the things that I know we still do, and I think in retrospect we would not have done, is we do soft deletes in Laravel, which means we don't delete anything.
Mm,
So for those who might not be familiar with Laravel, you can do what's called a soft delete, where it is the record, the data itself. When you go to delete something, it is not actually deleted. It still stays in your database. But what it does is in the record, in the particular record, whether it's SQL, there's a column, or if you're in Mongo, it's just a data key that says deleted at. And so if there is a value, Laravel handles this behind the scenes for you too. There is a date, it's a timestamp, or not a Unix timestamp, a date time string that says deleted at. So Laravel knows, okay, if there's a value in there, then it's been deleted. And then what you can do in Laravel, if you want to get old stuff, if you want stuff, say for instance, you want people to be able to undelete something that they have actually deleted. There's a trashed property, and you on a query you can say with trashed, and that will also get things that match your query that have been deleted, that have that deleted at flag. So what that means is that yes, you can bring back things that have been quote unquote deleted, but your data storage is way high because you have all these records that, depending on the size of your data, uh,
yeah.
that are still there in your database, whether you're using them or not.
Right. And let's explain to the audience a little bit about sharding. So sharding is a capability that MongoDB offers that allow you to spread your collections across multiple replica sets, and then your data is handled within ranges within each of the shards or those replica set. So on one hand, you get a scalability um, from adding more hardware and handling requests in parallel, but you also get resiliency because every shard is a replica set. And
So you
yeah,
have failover, right? So if something goes
yeah,
down, then you
yeah,
have other sources.
yeah. So each shard has its own failover mechanism. um, and when you use Laravel, you shard your collection, you pick your shard key. Obviously, you need to think about it because it should allow you to first spread the data evenly and not have those what we call hot shards when at the same time most of the workload goes to a specific shard. So in that case, we can see that the data is mostly distributed evenly. But then from the Laravel standpoint, right, you just access it as a normal database from your
Mhm.
MongoDB Atlas connection stream.
Right, I do. So I have uh, outside of this, I have an application that I maintain for an organization that's much smaller, and uses inertia stack. If you're familiar with inertia, it's awesome.
Mm.
If you're a JavaScript developer, and in that case, I use MySQL with Laravel and Vue, and then inertia between the two of them. But all that to say, I use two different databases, Mongo on one, MySQL on the other, completely different sizes. And yet in my Laravel code, my method calls are the same.
Mhm.
I have update this record, and handles behind the scenes. If I'm in Laravel working in GovTribe, if I want to save a record, it's the exact same code. It's all handled behind the scenes for me, which is great for portability.
Right. All right, great. Let's talk a little bit about the data structures and some of the code that handles those data structures. Is there any kind of like sample data that you can share with us? And
In terms of data in Mongo.
or code that
Well,
you
yeah,
want?
I'll give you a little. I'll show this one here, and so I'm trying to think. Let me find my account models here. So we were talking about referencing data before, right? So we'll have. This is just my local stuff, so it's fairly representative of what you would see in a prod database. We can share here.
Yeah, you'll need to increase the.
I can never get Studio to increase anymore. Let's see.
Yeah, maybe Control Plus or something. Or
I'm
you just
trying it. Command plus, Control plus, Command Control plus.
no. All right. Well,
So I'll give a little explanation here. So this is an account model. So an account for us is, like any other application, any other website where you as an organization, you have an account on our site. Within your organization, you have different users, that belong to that account. And so in this case, what we have here is I have my first line is the ID. So everything is 32 character hashes, 32 character, IDs in Mongo. So this is the ID for this account record, this Mongo record, and it's what we use. Next, we'll have an owner model ID. Okay. It's 32, but that's to the user record. That is the owner of the account, who's the person that created the account. And then we have a creator model ID. So who actually created it, and that's important. That's important differentiation because account owners can change over time. So let's say I work, for a contracting agency, and I'm the one that initially goes in. I set up the account. I created all the users. I'm the owner, so I'm the only one that can access the account information in the UI. I leave the company. Okay. And so I need to transfer that account ownership over to somebody else. So therefore that owner model ID value would change to whoever the new person is, even though I was the initial creator and the record's still there, right? And then all we have is some Stripe information because we use Stripe for billing, and the standard Laravel updated at and created at dates. And that's it. And then let's say we'll go to a user model, and this is one of my local ones here. Again, apologies, I can never get Studio to zoom in spite of everything else that I try. Got to message them about that, especially on a 32-bit, 32-inch screen. But we have so you're just going through the very few records keys in here. The ID, then we have a verified. So we use Twilio as an account verification platform. And once they've gone through the authentication, we know you're a real person, then verified is set to true. Here's the name. Pending email and pending phone number are filled in if it's pending and you haven't been verified. That gets nulled out once you're actually verified. Hashed password updated and created at. Here's your parent email, your email that you used to log in. Here's your phone number. Now here's the account model ID, right? So this is the ID of your parent account model. That was back over here.
Yeah.
And then now I'm sorry. So the way we are now is every account has a workspace, which is a working area. So the idea is that down the road, we could have multiple workspaces for an account, multiple areas, however you want to do it. As it is currently, we only define one workspace by default per account. But workspace model IDs here is an array. Granted, there's only going to be one, but there could be multiple, once we get to multiple. And that's really it. That's our user model.
Nice. So you basically have an array without one element, but you out of the box have the ability to to have your documents being prepared for extending this relationship.
Yes, for allowing
Basically,
multiple workspaces. Mhm.
yeah. And if I think about it as a developer, right, you might initially only had the creator ID, but then when you saw that there's a problem that you wanna add, fields, it's really easy to do it in MongoDB, right? You just add it to your module, and your next documents will be, added with it. You can gradually migrate your old documents. You can maybe leave them aside and have like a null value um, in the model owner for now. And when the model owner change, only then you're gonna add this. So I believe this is also one of the advantages of using MongoDB.
Yep, definitely a little more dynamic with your data. Allows you to be more dynamic with your data structure.
All right. Yeah, really nice. You did mention the many to many relationship, so I wonder if we could, or this one actually is a many to many relationship because.
Well, okay, you're talking just standard many to many. Okay, let me step back a little bit. Yes, so for those who might not know SQL, one of the cool things that you can do in SQL is have what's called a many to many relationship, where you have, normally say each user has one account, right? So you have a one-to-one relationship. Say your user record has an account ID that ties to the ID value in the accounts table, so on. Pretty straightforward. But if you get a place, and the one that always comes to mind for me, just from remembering living in the Drupal world, is roles and permissions. So one user can have multiple roles. One role can have many users assigned to it, and so that one-to-one relationship doesn't work. And so what you have is a many to many table. It's a relationship, and there's basically a join table, I think is the best term for it. So say, for instance, into the roles and users table, you have roles underscore users, where you'll have, for every combination, you have a record. So this user ID with this role ID, and maybe the same user ID with another role ID, and so on. Now, Laravel has a type of relationship defined, and this is a Laravel thing on top of SQL, not necessarily SQL within itself, where you can have what's called a morph many relationship, where you can have many to many, but the thing you are associating with can be of varying types, right? And so we have a particular type of entity that we have modeled that we used to call persona. We call it a human. So a human can be, other than the obvious, it could be, if you think of the different kinds of people and roles that exist in the contracting world, you could have somebody who works for a contractor. You could have somebody that works for a federal agency. They're as a disbursement officer, or they're procurement officer, or they're an agency head, or they're whatever. And then, so those are various types of humans. And then you have different types of contracting entities, opportunities, grants, awards, federal grant opportunities, federal contract opportunities, federal contract IDVs. The complexity is off the charts with how you can model those. So what we have done, and I don't know if this is standard, I just know that's something that we have done in our particular structure, is we have what's called a human reference model, where we use we create this many to many table in Mongo. So it's very relational to answer that question that came before it.
Yeah.
So the way, let me see, I'll bring up my code editor here, and maybe I can show a couple little things. So the way we do our Laravel models, as it's probably fairly common, I would imagine, in the PHP world, is instead of dumping everything in the model, we have different traits that we add to a model as needed. And a trait is like, basically, if anybody doesn't know, they're basically like an include or an import in JavaScript. If you import this into here and then it becomes available as whatever, that's what a trait is. That's just the PHP terminology for it. Let's see, so we'll go framework. Oops, double clicking doesn't work to share. You got to click the share button, right?
Yeah.
So we have, so this is our human reference model, has some complexity in here and how it references everything. But the gist that I want to point out is, so in your human model, I got to remember where this goes because it confuses me sometimes myself, and I have to remember what I'm doing. Human interest interface. You have a morph many on one side. Has one, has many. And then just a single one. So like a human, let me see. Okay, so this is my human model. Has many there. Yeah, so there's some complexity in here in terms of, so there's a human relationship here. So this is the trait that goes in the particular different models, the contracting data models, shall we say.
All right. So basically, you are able to, use the different pointers and define this many-to-many relationship, right? Between, so a human can be, associated to various opportunities, right? And this human can be in many opportunities at the same time. So
So I'll
Laravel,
show you here. Yeah, see, here's an interface. So we're using an interface which is basically the same as the trait. It just defines your different things, right?
Yeah.
So you've got your morph many, all your different morph many relationships. So a human can be a reference. It can be a point of contact. It can be, many different things. So what that does, so let me stop sharing you there, and I want to show you the data, because that's sort of important to understand how it's actually related together. So if we go back here to Studio, so we have here what are called human reference models, okay? So this is the join between the human model and whatever other model. You need to add it.
Oh, okay. My bad. Yeah.
There we go. Okay. So if you can't read it, apologies. So human model ID, right? So we're using their email address as an ID for the human record. There really wasn't, for various reasons, that's what works best. So now the reference model class, and this is the Laravel methodology here, is, okay, so this person is related to a vendor, and this is the vendor that they're related to. That's their Mongo ID, okay? And the type is, so this person is a point of contact for a particular vendor, okay? So in this particular case, they're referencing an external file. So we can upload files, docs, PDFs, images, CSVs, whatever. And this was an external file that they were referencing to. Here's another one as a point of contact.
And they're all located in the same collection. So if you're using the index, it is clustered on all of them pretty much.
No. Okay. So you got to remember, so vendor model is its own collection, and this is the ID in the vendor collection, right? So there's a separate collection for external files, right? And so this is their ID in...
No. I understand that, but all of those connecting documents,
yes,
listed on the same collection. So you can basically search for, for this user human ID, and you'll get all the referenced content, all the reference data that you need in one go. And then you just need to fetch, whatever you're looking into after that.
Correct. So this is the Mongo implementation of a MySQL many-to-many table, join table.
Yeah. So here you're not doing joins. Probably you can do like lookups, but you might do also like a two-step query.
Yes. Yeah, you're going to have to. You can't. I don't. You can tell me a bit more than this. I haven't really looked into it. I think there's some ways you can do queries like that with Mongo, um, if I remember. But generally, the way it's going to work for us is that we're going to, in our transformer, which is the class that takes all this data, gets it all together, and puts it in our search index as a unique model. And then once you get that model, then you've got everything you need because it's all been indexed together in a large document. But from a Mongo standpoint, we store them separately because otherwise you would have repetition up the wazoo, and that sort of defeats the purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, so we have many techniques. We have something that called also like a pattern that's called a single collection, is where you take different types of documents and you insert them into the same collection, but they every one of them have, like, let's say, an identifier field and a type field.
Mm-hmm.
And you can basically search all the types that a specific ID has, and you'll get all the types. It's like up to your application to now sort it for the right application modules, but the query will be fulfilled in one go. So you'll do like a join within the same collection, so it will be kind of a join. uh, but yeah, in that case, you made a reference collection, and I think a lot of people are afraid of that, but they don't understand that sometimes it might be a good solution, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's
Sure.
basically it's basically what works for your workload. And I guess that for you, having smaller documents helps with the ingestion process, because then you can bulk insert them faster.
Mm-hmm. Right. It just keeps things in neat. Like I said, you're not uh, duplicating a lot of data, that you don't need. So in this case of the human data, we're not having to put the vendor data in with the human model because it's separate, and we can, link it all together later. But it
Nice.
is, to be honest, it's basically sort of a creative workaround for something that I think SQL is probably a little better at. Both databases are going to have their strengths and weaknesses.
Mhm.
Uh, and a relational database is obviously going to be better at hooking stuff together very easily because it's not designed to do some of the same things that Mongo is, and vice versa. So
Yeah.
interestingly
Yeah.
enough, I'll make this point. I read this one time. I'll never forget this. I was at a bookstore. I think it was Barnes and Noble. This was years ago, and I was picked up. They had a MySQL for Dummies book. If you ever seen all those yellow and black books, something for dummies. I have. Oh no, I have the Idiot's Guide for Plumbing and Electrical Repair, but there's a billion thing for dummies. They're basically books that make something easy to understand for something that might be complex. And I happened to be thumbing through this MySQL book, MySQL for Dummies, and one of the pages I came across said that the term relational in relational database does not have to do with relating records. It has to do with set theory, which is the underlying mathematical theory that's used to write the database. So,
Yeah.
that's
So
I'd be willing to bet that's a common misperception that that's what relational means, but that's really not where the term comes from.
So I'll also say that we are also like a relational database in a way. I think we're a non-tabular database. I think that's the best descriptable. Like, we're a document database,
Document.
so we're
Mm-hmm.
non-tabular. Uh, and I guess that if your data is not related to anything, you should format it, right? Because it then doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, on that note, I really like the audience to go to Atlas, sign up. You can get a free cluster indefinitely, and try out Atlas, try your modules, try Laravel, um, join our community, come to talk to us, and see what other great guests we're going to have along the way. Um, and well, that was a really fascinating talk, Steve. Thank you for joining today.
Yeah, I will point out, just real interesting. I had to, when I was doing that upgrade um, to from 4 to 5 and 5 to 6, and I had to I spun up a test cluster, a test deployment is what it's called on Atlas, just to have some test data to play with and connect to my application. It was really pretty easy. I was uh, impressed with the UI, and some of it was a little complex. It took me some document reading to figure out, but I was able to do it without hassling anybody in support and able to read the document. So from a UI and management standpoint, Atlas is really, really good to use.
Yes, and we also have a lot of tutorials on how to deploy things on Atlas, how to develop with different languages and PHP as well. PHP is getting more and more traction, and it's really nice to see that it becomes cool again. There's lots of like huge conferences and lots of great frameworks that are being developed constantly. So
Yeah, Laracon. There's a number of Laracons around the world. There's Laracon US. I think there's one in Australia. They have them in India and Europe, and it's crazy how big it's gotten.
yeah, it has also all the AI modules now. A lot of the AI providers um, providing like AI capabilities into PHP because a lot of websites are still running on PHP and a lot of people are still developing in PHP.
Yeah,
So I,
we just started integrating AI into ours quite a bit with our data. That we use it, in not like something generative, but provide summaries. They ingest all of our information that we have and provide summaries of what something is for, and it can do some searching for you. So yeah, we've been doing that over the past few months, and it's really cool. People really like it.
yeah, we also have the vector search capabilities now. So um,
Hmm.
I know you guys were working with some other technologies, but I really
Hmm.
encourage you to think if you already have data in Mongo and it will be easy to index that with like vectors, that might be a benefit. Um, so yeah,
I don't know how
I know.
many people are reminded of airplane whenever they start hearing vector search, but that's always one of the first things that comes to my mind. What's your vector, Victor? Type stuff.
Right. I know you're a big fan of that joke, so I know
I
that you
am.
wanted.
So yes,
Yeah.
for those of you who don't know me, I also I do a podcast myself. It's called JavaScript Jabber, uh, and I used to do one on Vue, but I'm down to just doing the JavaScript. And I'm a big dad joke purveyor. I post on Twitter most weekdays. Wonder95 is my Twitter handle. I'll post a dad joke and in our Slack channel at work, and it's just and I will make it clear that I don't write them. I borrow them, shall we say. Uh, you wouldn't like the ones that I'd write. But yeah, I always like to share two or three at the uh, end of every podcast. And unfortunately, I don't have the sound capability here in StreamYard that I do on my own. So you'll just have to imagine the rim shots. Um, but for instance, some of my latest are: prison might be one word to you, but to some people, it's a whole sentence. Right? Um, I haven't slept in 10 days, which is a good thing because I sleep at night. And then today's dad joke: leather is rated based on its texture. So, for instance, cows that live in a place that have abundant water resources typically have softer hides, so they're rated A, really good. But hides from cows living in hot, dry climates are typically dehydrated.
Nice. There was one late question from the audience. What is the best way MongoDB to map many to many relationships, right? And there's an exclamation mark and a question mark. So we just chatted about it. So I would say that the popular two um, will be to either duplicate data. Sometimes it's not that nice because you need to always update the copies around. Um, but one way is the way Steve showed, which is actually having a connection collection where you reference, one side to the other by having those connecting documents, but they still can share same indexes within that collection. So you can surface all the relationship if you need all the things that are related between two entities. You can find those and then maybe have a small portion a little more richer structure than the one Steve showed, where you have some fields also embedded in those relationship documents. Uh, and the third one is, as I mentioned, using the one collection pattern where, let's say, I have an owner ID and I have um, and I can have different, products and different, let's say, jobs or whatever. So I can store my document in that collection, and I can store every product as a document, and I can store every job as a document. And if they all have an owner ID field, and I do whatever owner ID is, belongs to me, then they will surface. And this owner ID can be an array, so it can have different owner IDs.
Hmm.
Um, but we have some content on the Developer Center on, um, let me share that again, on different ways to map different types of relationships. So I really encourage people to go on this one. And also we have, let me find this one. We have a very nice course on data modeling at the university, at MongoDB University. Where was the banner? Yeah, here it is. So it's called university.mongodb.com, or you can go to learn.mongodb.com. And we have a data design, data modeling course that actually talks about one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-many relationships in different types. So I really encourage people to go and check that out. Whew. Yeah, so that was kind of like the last question and the last note. So thank you, Steve, for sharing your knowledge and your experience with MongoDB and Laravel, um, and for all the insights that you share with us.
You're welcome.
Uh,
It's my pleasure.
all right, and thanks everyone who joined us today from different parts of the world. And the recording will be available at our YouTube and LinkedIn profiles at MongoDB, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I'm gonna also repost that in my social media later on. I'll send it out to you, Steve, but you probably be able to find it.
Okay.
Um, so thanks everyone. Have a great day, night, or morning.
Adios.